Hi, and welcome to another episode of Starship Gaming. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell if you want notifications of when we release more awesome videos. Now, today we are going to talk about the infamous Coleco Chameleon, also known as the Retro VGS. Now, I'm not going to go over every little detail about it, but I'm just going to discuss what went down with this monstrosity. Of course, it was found out later on by 2016 that the Coleco Chameleon was nothing more than a scam, which I think is what a lot of people fear with the Atari VCS right now, which I actually did a video on the Atari VCS a little bit over a week or two ago. And, of course, in the video, and I'm going to tell you right now, I neither support nor not support the Atari VCS. I'm neutral here. But apparently that video happened to trigger quite a few people. Yeah. But the Coleco Chameleon is an example of something that just seemed too good to be true. Mostly in the aspect of it promised brand new cartridge-based games that would be released in stores, brand new titles, as well as being able to play the old Atari Jaguar games, and it just sounded too unbelievable. I mean, I never did really fall for this thing. It sounded like a good idea when it was being talked about, circa 2015, 2016, and there was a lot of things that went wrong here. I believe the first thing that really spelled doom for it, of course at the time it had a deal with Coleco, and eventually had a name change, but there was a prototype shown off, and this prototype was more or less a Super Nintendo. That's all it was, a Super Nintendo with lots of electrical tape. And the games being shown on it were on a flash cartridge. Yeah, that's not good. Then to try to correct things, they showed off I believe it was like a translucent shell with the inner workings and whatnot. And it was quickly identified on the internet that the board that was inside it was actually not the board that was made for this thing. It was, I believe, a graphics card, or something. They put inside a shell, a clear, translucent shell, to try to trick the public. And of course, if you've done a little digging around on YouTube, there's actually a video where they show their lab, where they're working hard, and what it was more or less a kitchen table with a bunch of random electronic junk thrown on it, to try to imitate the look that they were actually doing something on the Coleco Chameleon. Don't exactly know the entire circumstances of this thing. I don't know what their base of operations were, but according to what I've read and saw, it was more or less just developed and thrown together in some guy's house. Like, this was some guy's dream to have his own console, and he went way over his head, couldn't figure out how to do it, couldn't find anybody to help him do it, so he had maybe some, I don't know what happened. I don't know what his situation was there, but he ended up getting way over his head. But what eventually happened is, when all this controversy broke out, Coleco, they basically said, hey, you can't use the Coleco name on it anymore. So then they ended up switching over to the Retro VGS name. And the situation in which Coleco decided to drop their, having their name and whatnot on it, which Coleco is still around, but it's not the original company, by the way. It's just like Atari and Intellivision and all of them. It's just a revived name under a new company, new management, and whatnot. But when they demanded to inspect a prototype of the Coleco Chameleon, they did not have one. They wanted to know, where is this so-called prototype that you showed off at the American International Toy Fair, and they didn't have an answer, according to how things went down from what I've read. So that's how Coleco ended up saying, you know what, we're not going to put our name on this crap. We're not going to work with you anymore. You're on your own. That's pretty much how it went. And only from that prototype that was shown off in February 2016, it just snowballed from there. And eventually it got to the point that everyone who had supported the project turned against them. And from there, they, by the time you had Coleco step in, Coleco said, you know what, we're not going to put our name on it. And then eventually the project fell apart within a matter of weeks after that. And then they decided, you know what, the jig is up. We're going to terminate this project. We're not going to work on it anymore. And that was the end of the Coleco Chameleon / Retro VGS, pretty much. Yeah, I know there's a lot more information out there. I could go into detail about this whole situation. I basically wanted to just give a brief overview of what had happened with the Coleco Chameleon. And if I, decide to go more into detail with every little thing, I could literally have a 2 or 3 hour documentary about it. Now, had the Coleco Chameleon actually went through with its plan and been released, who's to say it would have succeeded? It might not have. You have to look at where the market is right now, because this Coleco Chameleon console would have originally came out around, if it actually went through with its plan, late 2016, early 2017. Who's to say it would still be around as of 2020, as of this recording? I mean, I would have bought one for the whole novelty of it if it actually existed. Back then I was, real heavy into collecting cartridge-based games. Now, not so much. I'm more into collecting PS1, a little bit of cartridge games, Super Nintendo. But this is just one of those things I might have invested in just for the whole novelty of it. I think it would have been interesting if it actually happened. And as it turned out, this went down as one of the greatest scams in gaming history. There's other ones out there, but this goes down as one of the biggest ones. I mean, there were even like 4 or 5, maybe more games, planned for this thing at launch. And of course, as we know now, those were all fake. There was none actually developed. I mean, there were some developed, but they were made for other things. So you get the picture here. And from the looks of things, it was supposed to be 32-bit, which the Atari Jaguar was 32-bit. But you also have to look at other 32-bit systems of the era, like, for example, the Sega 32X, which was cartridge-based, which is the closest you can compare it to other than comparing it directly to the Atari Jaguar. And then you have to look at the other 2 32-bit systems that were released at the time, but they were CD-based. The Sega Saturn and the Sony PlayStation, to just name a few. So I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. And remember, keep it civil with each other. I don't want to have to curb any fighting among people. If you watched one of my videos, I made a video talking about gaming and depression. Conflict actually makes me depressed. And in some cases, I turn off the comments if it gets a little too saucy. So please keep it civil, everyone. So tell me in the comments down below if there's a couple questions here. First one, if this actually did make it to production, would you have bought one? And the second question, do you think it would have been successful if it actually had made it to production? Last thing before I go, I want to make an announcement. I may start something called Fan of the Week, where I will give a shout out to any of our fans who comment down below. If you want a shout out, just say, hey, I'd like to have a chance to have a shout out. Just say it in the comments and I'll do a random drawing. I'll put your name in a hat, and if I draw your name, I'll give you we'll do it the old school way. I'll give you a shout out on our next video, or one of our next videos. It may be 2 or 3 videos before I start the actually doing the shout outs, but this will be the video that initiates it. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell if you want notifications of when we release more awesome videos. And until next time, I will see ya.